Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers. Pleased to be joined by fellow lifetime Longhorn, the young prodigy CJ Vogel, and we are here for our way too early preview and breakdown of the Longhorns' upcoming 2025 season. Getting closer and closer because we're getting closer to the end of our previews, and we start with the Arkansas Razorbacks today. We'll break them down, talk about that matchup. Thank you to our sponsor, Von Lane, vonlane.com. Use that code OTF25. And you'll get $20 off your first ride with our friends over at Von Lane. We'll tell you more about them coming up later in the program. But first, let's start breaking down this matchup, CJ. A heated rival of the Longhorns, heated and hated, I should say. A lot of Longhorn fans say that the Arkansas Razorbacks, they hate Texas more than they love themselves. Even Sark has brought up that great quote. And this is a team that took a step forward last year for Sam Pittman. They ended up being 7-6 last season, 1-3 in one-score games. So they had a chance to really flip things in their favor. Just couldn't quite get over the hump in some of those clutch situations. But it all starts with Taylor Green. They do have a returning starting quarterback in the same system. I think that's where you kind of start. That's where the optimism starts for them. But this year, a lot of Arkansas fans are hoping that they can do more than just play spoiler this season to some of the best teams in the SEC.
Yeah, I think, first and foremost, I think Sam Pittman played spoiler to a lot of the expectations for himself a year ago, right?
Yeah.
You know, a lot of folks were calling for his job to be up in the air again. You know, he, for his, to his credit, is back in Fayetteville, right? You know, a 7-6 season. They had the big win at home over Tennessee. They played Texas much tighter than I think a lot of folks were expecting, especially after getting blown out by Ole Miss just a few weeks prior. They were a competitive team in 2024. Will that be the case in 25? Well, they have a lot of new faces, Rod, and this is beyond your typical year-over-year turnover on the roster. Arkansas right now, and just their two deep alone on offense, how about 16 transfers? So there's a lot of continuity that they're going to have to get up to speed by. And fortunately for them, when they come to Austin November 22nd, they should have enough gameplay, enough ability, or enough time on the field, essentially, to get to where they need to be competitive in this game once again. But early on, that's where I look at them and say, ooh, can they overcome the brand new faces in the huddle early in the season?
Yep, no doubt about that. Got Notre Dame early on in that non-con schedule too, so that's a kind of a big-time game for Arkansas fans. But let's start with one of the pieces coming back, because you're right, there's a lot of turnover on this team. One of the pieces coming back is Taylor Green, and he actually, Taylor Green is proof has one of the most, I think, the more impressive talent profiles of any quarterback in the country. In just terms of just size, speed, just the combination of them. Some people, these are not my comparisons. I've heard NFL draft analysts make these comparisons. Upside of a guy like Colin Kaepernick, Randall Cunningham has come up. There have been some VY comps. I know, blasphemy for Longhorn fans, but he is special. It's a lot of, boom or bust with him, right? He, according to Pro Football Focus, 22 big-time throws last year. That was top 10 in the Power 4, but 12 fumbles. Led all Power 4 players, 17 turnover-worthy plays. Matter of fact, they were 120th, I believe, in turnovers last year. Texas, wasn't better at all. They were 130th, but they were a much better team overall. But, his 3.19 average seconds to throw, his time to throw, that was 10th highest, longest, however you want to say it, which also led to him being in a lot of situations where he was under pressure a lot, holding on to the football. I think the hope is that now another year in a system with Bobby Petrino's system, he'll be more comfortable. Now you do have to work on the chemistry with the wide receivers and a lot of new faces on the offensive line. They're going to hope jail early, but there's no doubt that Taylor Green's upside is tremendous. It really is. Whether he reaches that upside, that expectation level, that's a different discussion for a different day. But he's definitely got those overall raw tools. He's toolsy, as the kids would say.
Yeah, toolsy, raw, whatever you want to say. I think they all kind of fit in that same direction of how to describe Taylor Green. And look, Texas saw it a little bit last year, right? The big thing for Taylor Green is you got to cut down on the turnovers. And that's for Arkansas in general. Last year, they were top 10 in the country in giveaways. And that, I don't know if anybody remembers that Oklahoma State game
Yeah.
early in the season. But that was a game in which in Stillwater, Arkansas was up by about 20 points, and they ended up losing that game in overtime. It was a terrible collapse towards the back end, but it was all because of fumbles on punt returns. It was fumbles by Taylon Green and Rocket Sanders at the time, giveaways. That has to be the improvement. And again, that's not going to be easy with all of these new faces. I've counted up to about 35 transfers coming in this cycle alone, on top of 25 true freshmen on this roster. So a lot of new faces, but Rob, they brought in some talent. And I want to start on that wide receiver spot.
Let's do it.
Omega Blake, that's the one for me that I've really been.
Great name, by the way. Great
name. Big time talent. They're expecting him to fill the shoes of an Andrew Armstrong, who was drafted to the NFL. Also Isaac Tesla, who was taken by the Detroit Lions, a true steal early in that NFL draft earlier in the spring. I believe his shoes are going to be filled by Jaylen Brown. I got to watch him in high school, originally committed to Michigan, out of the Illinois area, greater Chicago area.
Yeah.
Really athletic. I'm a big fan of his. But the one thing that I'm really interested in seeing here is, how do they mesh with this quarterback that's receiving all sorts of praise and comparisons that you just went through?
No, I love that. I love that name. And you're right. I mean, he's kind of a dude. I believe he's coming from Charlotte was it South Carolina or something like that, maybe before that. He's guy averages 24 yards a reception.
Yeah,
that's freaky stuff. Now his catch rate is like right around 50%, but when he catches it, he's like his quarterback, or at least his quarterback coming up this season. Very boom or bust, but he was a dude, man. Over 700 receiving yards at Charlotte, 9 touchdowns, made a lot of plays. How about this one? This is a little nugget I got from an Arkansas fan. They were hearing a lot of good things about this young man. You actually may know him from some time at just on the recruiting trail. Raylan Sharp. They got a lot of transfer wide receivers, guys. He's one of them. He's from Fresno State, but apparently they were like childhood friends in the DFW area. And apparently they went to the same high school at one point before Taylon Green decided to transfer. And then Raylan Sharp ended up at, I believe it's U of H on a track scholarship, as a track football guy, and then transferred where? To Missouri State, and played under Bobby Petrino. So he knows the system. And then has transferred since, I believe, to Fresno State. And now his last year, he is at Arkansas, back with his childhood friend. And there are a lot of folks that said that he was actually recruited by Taylon Green, like when his name came up in the transfer portal. So that's a guy. He's got track guy. So track speed, 10.3 verified track speed. He's got chemistry with Taylon Green, because apparently they've been really good friends ever since. They were back in track meets in childhood and middle school. Actually, apparently this relationship goes back. So he's a sleeper. He's been working the slot, and there have been a lot of reports coming out from training camp of him looking really good so far, and them having early chemistry. So that's a guy to watch. Raylan Sharp.
Yeah,
another receiver to watch out of that group. But they brought in a ton of guys. I mean, they just brought in a ton of guys, and
they had to.
Yeah, because they lost their top like 8 pass catchers from last season.
It was pretty wild, yeah.
So yeah, I like what they did. They just brought in possible options. They got this other kid, Kevin Shanks, really good punt returner, actually, from UAB. He had 2 punt returns for touchdowns last year. I heard really good things about him, and they got a couple of freshmen they hope step up as well. The offensive line. Let's go to the O-line next, because I think I'm with you. Other than the weapons for him on the outside at wide receiver, the O-line actually did bring back a couple of starters, but they moved them around, apparently. They're moving positions. One of the reports is that Fernando Carmona, really good player for them. He's a senior. He is moving from left tackle to left guard, reportedly. Started most of the season at left tackle from last year, and he's going to move inside to left guard. And there's also a report that Emarion Harris, who last year was a right guard and then played tackle after there were some injuries, that he is now shifting to guard as well. And then they brought in Corey Robinson, stud pass blocker, actually one of the best pass blockers in the country. And he's from Georgia Tech. and he's coming in to play. Reportedly, he's going to play the left tackle spots. And then they got this other kid, Shaq McCray, huge, 6'8", 360. He's a transfer, I believe, from Oregon, and he's slated to play the right tackle. And they got a center, Caden Kittler from UCF, who's projected to play start for center for them. So they brought in a lot of new pieces, moved some pieces around. They needed to. They were really bad at pass protection last year, and the hope is that they'll be able to now to be able to run the rock a little bit more effectively and also be able to protect Taylor Green a little bit better.
Yeah, quick note, I wanted to go back. Jalen Brown had a Gulliver Prep in Miami, committed to Florida State before transferring in. Big-time talent. Going back to that offensive line, you look back at where they were able to exceed their expectations in 2024, and that Tennessee game was one. You look at the Texas game, in which they were able to keep games much closer than maybe you expected, but in large part because of the mobility of a Taylor Green. This year, Braylon Russell, I think, is in for a big year. Obviously, we saw Jaquindon Jackson turn into an NFL draft pick as well. What can a Braylon Russell do, in which we saw him just a little bit a year ago? But I do think he's in for a monster year, especially considering, hey, if Sam Pittman was able to salvage an offensive line a year ago that didn't have high expectations, going out and adding all these transfer portal guys, Rod, I'm expecting them to be a much more able unit in 2025.
Yep. No, I agree with you about Braylon. He's big too, big back. I think that fits.
They love that. They love those bigger, thicker guys.
Yeah, he wants to play bully ball ideally. And when they're at their best, like you said, against Texas, they had that ability. And last year, it was just too many injuries, right? Jaquindon Jackson was injured. Braylon Russell was injured a lot of the time last year too, so they didn't have that combo. They brought in a young man from New Mexico State, Mike Washington, apparently, who had a really good spring. And there's been a lot of glowing reviews about him. So maybe they will have a 1-2 punch, but no doubt about it, Braylon Russell is considered to be the guy for them at the featured back in the running game. And if he can't stay healthy, they're going to have some issues up front. Tight end, I mean, they actually had one of their, is it Luke Haas? He ended up transferring. Really, he was, I think, a really good tight end for them. They're going to have Rohan Jones, who transferred from Montana State, Jaden Platt, who transferred from A&M, and then Andreas Pasquet and Maddox Lassiter were guys who returned for them. Not much expected in terms of an impact on the offense from the tight end position, but I think that'll be more of a glorified blocker in the run game if they can get, like you said, some juice from Braylon Russell. But that's pretty much the offense. I mean, it's just a Taylor Green show. Yeah. The hope is that Braylon Russell will add to that, and they'll find some of those pieces like you brought up, Omega, Blake, the wide receiver, or maybe it's a Raylan Sharp. Maybe it's a Kevin Shanks, who knows, at wide receiver that really steps up for them and can make some plays. All right, let's jump to the defensive side of things for Arkansas, because, last year the pass defense was one of the worst in college football. I mean, let's just be honest about it. They were 111th in pass defense last season, 104th in EPA allowed per pass, and they lost a lot. Now, maybe that's a good thing. If you look at it, 18 of their players with at least 200 snaps last season, they only returned 6 of those players. So a lot of changes on the defensive side of the ball. One of the studs, though, and I guess maybe we can start in the back end or start up front. Up front is 326 pounds, 6'5", Cameron Ball. He has been a consistent force for them in the middle for a couple of years. He's a multi-year starter for him, 27 defensive stops. That's one of the best numbers in the Power Four. He's a really good player for him. I think that's where they start. And then there's a nucleus, if you will, in that central nervous system right behind them. They got good news that Steven Dix Jr., one of his third leading tackle last year, that he was going to return at linebacker, 6th year senior, and that Xavier Sore, I think that's how you pronounce his name. Mm-hmm. I apologize if I mispronounced it, 5th year linebacker, that he's going to be also in the middle. So to me, that's that little, kind of holy trinity for them. Right? That really has got to be the life force of this defense, because those are the most consistent and most proven commodities on defense for them.
Yeah, I think they're really looking at Dix and Sorey to be their 2 guys in 2025. Of course, that defense actually pretty stingy a year ago, and they haven't needed necessarily to go out and add too many guys out of the portal this year. Mm-hmm. but they lose Jalen Braxton to Ole Miss, a star cornerback. We'll talk about that secondary here in a minute. I did want to go back to that Texas game a year ago in Fayetteville, Rod, because outside of a turnover, the interception from Jahdae Barron on Taylon Green, look, they held Texas to 5 points on 6 possessions outside of the next possession off of the turnover. So we talk about putting Texas's defense in a bind off of quick turnovers, bad punts, poor field position. A year ago, Arkansas held Texas very much in check in that first half to just 3 points outside of the 7 scored off of a turnover. So you look at that linebacking core on top of what they're expecting to be a pretty solid defensive front. It should be a competitive unit once again. And look, I'm actually a big fan of Travis Williams, the third-year defensive coordinator right now. Arkansas's got a chance to be a pretty under-the-radar yet very competitive defense in 2025.
Yeah, no, I like him too, actually. I thought he had a good game plan versus Sark going back to that game in Fayetteville last year. They brought in what could be some impact transfers, since we're talking about the front 7 there, which it could end up being a strength for them. I don't think they know about the other pieces on the defensive line quite just yet. They brought in an edge from out of Troy, 6'4", 240, Phillip Lee, who can play kind of an outside linebacker, edge defender role for him, had 7.5 sacks, 15 tackles for loss. And then there's just a lot of guys that are hoping step up in big roles that have been either in the system or they transferred in. Kavian Henderson, Reginald Vaughn, Kevin Otis, Quincy Rhodes Jr. and Danny Saili are 2 names that, just doing research on Arkansas, that came up a lot on that defensive line. But they got the guys, Charlie Collins. They have, I think guys who can be contributors, who's going to separate and become a playmaker for them, in addition to Cameron Ball on that defensive front. And they brought in transfers, Michigan State transfer Ken Talley, Justice Boone from Florida, David Oke out of Abilene Christian. I mean, they brought in some dudes on the defensive front. So I think the hope is that those guys step up and separate. But there's no doubt the names to watch: Sorey and Dix in the middle, first and third leading tackler from last season, and then Cameron Ball. Those are kind of the stars up front for him. But jump to the back end, and it was problematic for him last year. I'll say this: the pieces that I like that are coming back for him, Jaheim Singletary is a guy that played, about 150 snaps last year for him. I think he's going to end up being one of the starting corners, from what I can gather. Selman Bridges is another name that comes up a lot at the corner spot for them. And then looking at the nickel or the star corner, whatever, slot corner, Larry Worth the third is another name that comes up when we talk about the cornerback. They brought in some guys via the transfer portal. Julian Neal, they brought in. He's a really he was a good coverage guy. They brought in via the transfer portal, and they brought in another one, Jordan Young, out of Cincinnati via the transfer portal, play corner. So those are their options at the cornerback position.
They've got a type at cornerback, and I've been waiting to get to this. Selman Bridges about 6'3", Larry Worth the third. He's listed at 6'4" on the roster. Quintavious Scandrett listed at 6'3" on the roster. Jordan Young, really the shortest of the bunch, listed at 6 foot. And then Jaheim Singletary, 6'2". So you've got a lot of length, a lot of size. That was their MO, saying, you know what? I've had enough with these little guys. They might be sticky, but we've got to play a little bit more physical on the outside. And that's exactly what Arkansas is building right now. Texas fans should be familiar with Selman Bridges out of Lake Belton up in the Waco area.
Oh, yeah, he's a good player.
He is, and he works with Band Performance out of high school down here in Austin as well. So there's familiarity with, for me at least, and how he's able to move going into year 2 for him. They're expecting a big leap, but Rod, that's an interesting secondary, because on top of what we expect to be a very solid, a little above average front 7, I think that, the linebackers of Dix and Sorey are going to be really talented. If you're able to have that length on the outside, that makes life very difficult for teams that want to go deep if they're not able to protect. And obviously now you got to deal with, wingspans that are significantly longer than your typical cornerback.
No, I totally agree with you. Man, who's the SEC coach that was talking about length and girth?
Oh, yeah.
Was that Hugh Free? Who was that?
Yeah, it was. was.
But he's right about that. I mean, Sark essentially says the same thing. I mean, look at the Texas secondary. We talked about that. So I agree with that philosophy, and I think it works for Arkansas. The safety position, names that came up a lot: Caleb Wooden and Miguel Mitchell. Was a name, and Quintavious Scandrett. I hope I pronounced his name correctly, or some of the names that came up. But I think corner, if you're looking for a strength at Arkansas, I'm with you. I think it might be corner because they got a lot of guys with really high upside. And if it clicks, this formula they have, it can be really special. They get guys who are sticky and long defenders like that to be able to match up with some of those SEC wide receivers. All right, specialist-wise, just throwing it out there. They do have a really good punter. He's a senior, Devin Bell. So they return one of the best punters in the country for them. And reports are they have a star freshman kicker. Scott Starzek is getting rave reviews, apparently. I mean, who gives reviews about kickers? That's maybe camp isn't going so well. I don't know, because Texas, we haven't heard anything about the kickers really, but hey, it's all good. That means they're doing their job. We're not talking about the kickers usually. All right, let's thank our sponsor, our friends over at Von Lane. Before we end our program, thank them for sponsoring our way too early preview and breakdown. Folks, if you're trying to get from one of the major Texas cities to another, getting to Houston and Dallas and Austin and Fort Worth, San Antonio, you name it, it can be a bit of a toss-up and a hassle and very stressful. Do you deal with the airport chaos and hope your flight isn't delayed? Or do you brace yourself for hours behind the wheel, battling traffic and road rage and burning an entire day of productivity? Well, there's a third option, and it's the best option. Von Lane. You arrive at a luxury hotel terminal, no TSA lines, no long-term parking lots, just a seamless boarding experience. It takes minutes, not hours. You settle into one of just 22 oversized first-class seats with 140-degree recline, leg rest, and a cabin attendant serving complimentary snacks, beverages, and on select trips, a full meal if you'd like. And if you need to relax, it's simple. Just lean back and enjoy the ride. But if you want to stay productive, there's high-speed Wi-Fi and power at every seat. Fall travel is booking fast, so reserve your spot right now for October trips to Texas versus OU in Dallas and F1 and ACL in Austin, or college football weekends in Nashville, Dallas, Fort Worth, and Houston. Von Lane connects Austin, Dallas, Houston, Fort Worth, San Antonio, Nashville, Atlanta, Memphis, Knoxville as well, the Woodlands, Plano. They just keep adding more and more cities to the list. Visit vonlane.com and use the code OTF25 to save $20 off your first ride with Von Lane. Von Lane, elevated regional bus transportation. Thank you very much to our friends at Von Lane for sponsoring our way too early preview and breakdown. Thank you, CJ, for all your knowledge and expertise. We appreciate that. And thank all you guys out there for watching and for listening. For CJ and our friends at Von Lane, I'm lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers. Until next time, hook 'em horns.